My son stood in my kitchen with legal papers spread across the table, calmly explaining that I was too old to run my own farm. 3 weeks later, he sat inside a courtroom and watched a judge take away the very power he had tried to steal from me. But what happened between those two moments began with something much smaller. A broken-down truck, an old man, and a 200-pound table saw. My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 64 years old, and for more than 4 decades, I've worked 340 acres of almond trees in California's Central Valley. My father gave me the land in 1983. I still remember his hand trembling as he signed the papers. He looked at me and said, "This ground remembers everything. Every honest thing a man does out here, the soil keeps it." Back then, I thought it was just something an old farmer said. Now I understand. That morning started like thousands before it. Coffee on the porch, boots on dusty ground, a slow walk between the almond rows, and as always, I stopped beneath the oldest tree on the property. My wife, Helen, used to sit there every Sunday with a paperback novel and a glass of sweet tea. She had been gone 3 years. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to burial. She spent most of those 4 months telling me not to worry about her and to replace the irrigation lines before spring. That was Helen. Practical until the very end. At 8 that morning, my son Ethan arrived. Pressed khakis. Coffee from town. That familiar smile he'd worn since childhood. He brought cornbread from his wife Melissa, asked whether I was sleeping well, and talked about the weather. Then he placed a leather document bag on my kitchen table. My stomach tightened. I didn't know why. Not yet. "I've been doing some research," Ethan said. "About what?" "About families. Large properties. What happens when the owner gets older?" I stared at him. He smiled. "I just want to protect you, Dad." He never used the word conservatorship. The papers used softer language. Financial management assistance. Designated representative. Acting in the best interests of the principal. A lawyer in Fresno had prepared everything. Melissa had reviewed it. "It's completely standard," Ethan assured me. I turned the pages slowly. Then I reached page 4. My eyes stopped. The document gave Ethan authority to make binding decisions on my behalf, including decisions involving the farm, the land, my father's land, my wife's land, my life's work. I looked up. "What exactly am I signing over?" Ethan's smile barely moved. "Nothing you need to worry about." I pushed the papers away. He laughed softly. "Dad, I'm not trying to take anything from you." Then he said the words that almost made me lower my guard. "I would never let anything happen to the place Mom built with you." Helen. Her name still had a way of weakening every wall around my heart. My grip loosened around the pen. Then my phone rang. It was an almond broker I'd worked with for 11 years. I stepped outside. When I returned, Ethan had already packed the papers. "No pressure," he said. "Take all the time you need." He left 20 minutes later. I remained at the kitchen table. The house was silent. I stared at my farm ledger without seeing a single number. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. Not yet. The truth didn't begin with the papers. It began 8 months earlier, with things I had convinced myself were bad luck. In February, one of my irrigation valves suddenly failed. It wasn't worn out. It had been forced. The repair cost me $1,100. Ethan arrived 3 days later. He walked around the damaged equipment, shaking his head. "This place is too much for one person, Dad." I told him I had managed it for 40 years. He smiled. "I know. I'm just saying." Then, in August, the drive belt on my harvester snapped. The machine was 4 years old. Well maintained. There was no reason for it to fail. Ethan appeared again. His hand landed on my shoulder. "There's no shame in letting someone help carry the load." The sentence sounded caring. At the time. Looking back, it sounds completely different. Then 2 of my longest-standing buyers canceled their contracts in the same week. Neither gave me a real explanation. Every time something went wrong, Ethan appeared. Every time, he repeated the same message. "You can't keep doing this alone." And beneath all of it, something else was happening. Money was disappearing. My accountant, Maria Reyes, had handled my books for 14 years. One afternoon, she came into my office and closed the door behind her. She looked frightened, not nervous. "Frightened, Richard," she said quietly. "We need to talk." She opened a spreadsheet. There were withdrawals scattered across months. Small amounts. Nothing dramatic. But together? $87,000. 23 transactions. Every withdrawal had been authorized through a secondary operational account Ethan had access to. I leaned back in my chair. Are you sure? Maria nodded. I checked them twice. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She looked down. I tried. She told me she'd written me a letter in April. She had walked it to the mailbox herself. Then she waited 2 weeks for me to call. I never did. I had never received it. But Maria had done something else. Something that would eventually save me. She had copied every suspicious financial record onto a USB drive. Every invoice. Every transfer. Every authorization. She carried the drive home every night because she was afraid the original records might disappear. 2 days after Ethan brought me those legal papers, he offered to drive me to the farm supply store. On the way home, we passed an old pickup parked on the shoulder of the county road. An elderly man was struggling beside it. A heavy cast-iron table saw sat on the ground. He was trying to lift it alone. Pull over, I told Ethan. He didn't answer. I looked at him. Pull over. He sighed and stopped. I climbed out. Ethan stayed inside the truck, staring at his phone. The old man's name was Walter Briggs. Together we wrestled the saw onto his truck. My back complained. My knees complained, but I laughed anyway. Walter opened a dented thermos and poured me coffee. Then he glanced toward Ethan. His expression changed. That's your son? I smiled. That's him. Walter looked at Ethan for another second. Then he looked back at me. Mr. Callahan, I need to ask you something. His voice had changed. It was quieter now. Serious. I need you to hear me out. I nodded. Walter told me he had a habit of recording machinery before buying it. He filmed every angle, every scratch, every serial number. It protected him from dishonest sellers. A few days earlier, he had been inspecting equipment on a property 12 miles east. While waiting for the seller, he started recording. Then 2 men walked around the corner. They didn't know Walter was there. They started talking. Walter kept filming. One of the men said something that made my blood run cold. Once the old man signs the management transfer, the whole thing moves to us. The other asked what would happen if the owner refused. The first man laughed. He won't refuse. We've been making sure of that for months. Walter stared at me. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. I recognized your son's voice. My chest tightened. He pulled out his phone. Listen. The video was shaky. The picture showed the corner of an old storage building. 2 men stood partly hidden from view. I couldn't clearly see their faces, but I didn't need to. The voice coming through Walter's phone was enough. It was Ethan, my son. The same voice that had called me Dad that morning. The same voice that had promised to protect my farm. Now that voice was calmly explaining how he planned to take it. Craig's already got the buyer lined up, Ethan said on the recording. We close before the end of the year. The other man asked, and if your father refuses? Ethan didn't hesitate. He won't. Then came the sentence that made my hands go cold. We've been making sure of that for months. He thinks the place is falling apart around him. I stopped the video. For several seconds, nobody spoke. I looked toward my truck. Ethan was still sitting there, head down, phone in hand, completely unaware that his plan had just begun collapsing. Walter watched me carefully. I asked him 2 questions. Has anyone else seen this? No, will you keep it that way? Walter nodded. I'll show it to whoever you say. But until then it stays with me. I thanked him. Then I climbed back into the truck. Ethan looked up. You okay, Dad? I stared through the windshield. Yeah, something wrong? I shook my head. No. And that was the first lie I ever told my son. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed the truth. A man who reacts before understanding the whole shape of a problem ends up fighting shadows. That night, after Ethan left, I locked my office door. I pulled every bank record from the previous year. 23 withdrawals, $87,000, exactly what Maria had shown me. Then I opened an old filing cabinet. Inside was an envelope I didn't recognize. My hands were already trembling before I opened it. Inside was a limited power of attorney. It gave Ethan full financial authority over the farm. My name appeared at the bottom. My signature appeared beneath it. Except it wasn't my signature. I'd signed my name for 64 years. I knew every curve, every stroke, the curl in the R, the way the final letter stretched. This signature was close, almost perfect, but it wasn't mine. Someone had practiced. Someone had studied my handwriting. Someone had forged it carefully. I opened the second envelope. Inside was a draft agreement transferring the farm's primary assets to a newly registered company. The members were listed: Ethan Callahan, Melissa Callahan, my son, my daughter-in-law, my farm, my father's farm, the farm where Helen had spent her final years. I sat alone in the dark. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the old wall clock ticking. Every sound suddenly seemed too loud. I wanted to call Ethan. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could do this, but another voice inside me said, "Don't. Not yet." I called my attorney, Daniel Mercer. He had handled my affairs for 19 years. I told him everything. The recording, the withdrawals, the forged signature, the company agreement. There was a long silence. Then Daniel said, "Richard, bring everything to my office tomorrow morning. What are we dealing with? If that signature was forged, we're potentially looking at forgery. Combined with those withdrawals, we could be dealing with elder financial abuse." The words sounded clinical, but they landed like stones. Daniel told me not to confront Ethan, not to warn him, not to destroy anything. Let him keep believing you don't know. The next morning, Maria met us at a diner. She looked pale. Her hands shook as she opened her leather portfolio. "I should have fought harder," she whispered. "You tried." "No, I was scared." Then she told me the part she'd been too frightened to say before. Ethan had approached her 11 months earlier. He implied that if she questioned certain accounts, he could make problems for her. He knew she was struggling financially. He used that fear against her. Maria slid the April letter across the table, the letter she'd tried to send me. Then she handed Daniel the USB drive. "Everything is on there," she said. Daniel looked at me. "We're going to build this carefully." For 3 days we did nothing except gather evidence, and on the third day Daniel received a phone call. His expression changed. "Richard," he said, "Ethan filed something this morning." My stomach dropped. "A formal conservatorship petition." He paused. "The hearing is in 18 days. My son wasn't waiting anymore. He was coming for everything. For 18 days, I lived in a strange kind of silence. Every morning, I walked the almond rows. Every evening, I checked the locks. And every night, I wondered how the son I'd raised had become the man trying to take his father's life work. Daniel investigated the people behind Ethan's plan. That's when we found Victor Whitfield, a real estate broker. Victor had been involved in several questionable property deals. He was supposed to be the man arranging the sale after Ethan gained control of the farm. Daniel contacted him. At first, Victor denied everything. Then Daniel showed him enough evidence to make denial impossible. Victor changed his story. He agreed to cooperate, and what he revealed made the betrayal even worse. Ethan hadn't been acting alone. Melissa had designed much of the plan. She had contacted Victor. She had discussed the commission. She had helped design the transfer strategy. Ethan was the face. Melissa was the architect. I sat in Daniel's office listening to the details. I felt something inside me go numb. I had trusted these people around my dinner table. They had eaten food from my kitchen. They had hugged me at Christmas. And behind my back they had been calculating the value of my land. Then Melissa did something none of us expected. She contacted the prosecutor herself. She offered everything. Messages, planning documents, emails, conversations. She agreed to testify against Ethan. In exchange, she would receive a plea agreement, a felony conviction, probation, no prison time. And she would surrender her CPA license. She gave up her husband to save herself. That night, Ethan came to my house. Unannounced, no pressed shirt, no confident smile, no legal papers. He looked exhausted. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd tried to convince me that I needed him. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Then he looked at me. "Do you still think of me as your son?" I felt something tear inside my chest, because despite everything, the answer was yes. "You're my son," I said. His eyes filled with tears. "But that doesn't change what you did." He looked down. I thought I could make it easier. "Easier for who?" He didn't answer. "You wanted the farm. I thought I could make it worth more. You forged my name." His shoulders dropped. "I know. You stole from me. I know. And you tried to convince a court that I couldn't manage my own life." He covered his face. "I know." For the first time I saw something beneath his greed. Fear, He had convinced himself that wanting something badly enough made it right, that because he was my son, he deserved the land. That because he believed he could run it better, stealing control wasn't really stealing. He finally looked up. I wanted it easy, Dad. I shook my head. Nothing worth having is easy. He started crying. I didn't. Not because I didn't love him. Because I'd spent too many years protecting him from consequences. I wasn't going to do it anymore. Go home, Ethan. He stood. He hesitated near the door. Then he walked away. The next morning, Daniel called. The hearing is still 18 days away. I know. But we have something else. What? The prosecutor has accepted Melissa's cooperation. Victor's statement is signed. Walter is prepared to testify. I closed my eyes. For months, Ethan had been building a trap around me. Now the trap was closing around him. But I didn't want him destroyed out of hatred. I wanted the truth exposed. I wanted my farm protected. I wanted justice. And I wanted the person who had betrayed me to understand that love didn't mean immunity. 18 days later, I walked into Fresno County Superior Court. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The wooden benches looked worn. Nothing like the dramatic courtrooms in movies. Ethan sat across the room. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering. Ethan wouldn't look at me. Daniel placed his files on the table. Thick, organized, ready. The judge entered. Everyone stood. I took a slow breath. The hearing began, and my son was about to discover just how much evidence his own plan had left behind. Ethan's attorney began with concern. That was the strategy. Concern for my age. Concern for the farm. Concern for my ability to manage 340 acres. He described me as overwhelmed. Tired, unable to keep up. I listened without moving. Because every word was built on a lie Ethan had helped create. Then Daniel stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He started with the 23 withdrawals. $87,000. Bank records. Authorization trails. Dates, amounts, everything lined up. Then came the forged power of attorney. Daniel placed the document before the court. Alongside it was the forensic examiner's report. The signature wasn't mine. It was a deliberate imitation. Carefully practiced. Carefully placed. But still a forgery. Then Daniel introduced the proposed company agreement. The document Ethan had prepared to transfer the farm's primary assets. The only members? Ethan and Melissa. I looked across the courtroom. For the first time, Ethan looked afraid. Daniel wasn't finished. He introduced Victor's sworn cooperation statement. Victor confirmed the meetings. The buyer. The planned transfer. The commission. The entire strategy. Then the prosecutor stood. Her voice was calm. The state intends to file criminal charges. Ethan's face went pale. The courtroom became completely silent. Then Walter took the witness stand. The old man I'd met on the side of the road. The man I'd stopped to help when Ethan couldn't even be bothered to leave his truck. Walter sat calmly. Ethan's attorney tried to challenge him. His eyesight. His memory. His reason for recording. His relationship with me. Walter listened to every question. Then he answered simply. I had never met Mr. Callahan before that morning. The attorney pressed harder. You had no personal reason to favor him? No, you can't see the faces clearly on the recording? Not clearly. So how can you identify the speaker? Walter looked directly at the attorney. Because I know what I heard. The attorney frowned. Walter continued. And after meeting Mr. Callahan that morning, I recognized the voice when I listened again. The attorney tried another question. Walter answered. Calmly, precisely, no anger, no drama, just facts. Finally, the attorney sat down. Daniel looked at the judge. Then he played the recording. Ethan's own voice filled the courtroom. Once the old man signs the management transfer, the whole thing moves to us. I closed my eyes. I'd heard it before. But hearing it there, in that courtroom, with my son sitting only a few feet away, it felt different. The judge listened. The recording ended. No one spoke. Then Ethan suddenly stood. I want to explain. His attorney grabbed his arm. Sit down. Ethan pulled away. I need to explain. The judge looked at him. Mr. Callahan, speak through your attorney. He sat. Our eyes met. For 1 second, everything disappeared. The lawyers, the documents, the courtroom. I saw the little boy who used to run between the almond trees, the teenager who'd once fallen asleep in my truck after a long harvest day, the young man I'd watched graduate. And then I saw the adult sitting there, a man who had decided my trust was something he could exploit. The judge left the courtroom. 22 minutes later, she returned. Everyone stood. She denied Ethan's conservatorship petition entirely. Then she said something that stunned even me. The very problems Ethan had presented as evidence of my inability to manage the farm had been caused by Ethan himself. The irrigation damage, the financial irregularities, the operational disruptions. The court saw the pattern. A restraining order was issued. Ethan was barred from touching a single farm asset. Then the prosecutor announced formal criminal charges would follow. Forgery, elder financial abuse. I watched Ethan gather his papers. His hands were shaking. He walked toward the exit. He didn't look back. Not once. I remained seated. Because the battle was over. But the victory didn't feel the way I expected. There was no celebration, no satisfaction, just a strange emptiness. I had protected my farm, but I couldn't protect the relationship I'd once believed was unbreakable. After the hearing, I sat in my truck with Walter beside me. For 18 days, I'd kept everything together. The evidence, the meetings, the fear, the memories. But now there was nothing left to hold together. I started crying. Not because I'd lost. I hadn't lost. My farm was safe. My name was clear. My father's land was still mine. I cried because I had spent 64 years believing that the people who loved you were automatically the safest people to trust. And I had been wrong. Walter didn't tell me everything would be okay. He didn't give me some speech about forgiveness. He simply put his hand on my shoulder and let me sit with the pain. Sometimes that's the kindest thing another human being can do. You don't need to fix someone's heartbreak. You just need to stay. Ethan eventually accepted a plea agreement. 2 years in state prison. 3 years of supervised release. Full restitution of the $87,000, plus interest. Melissa completed her own agreement. She left Fresno for good. Victor cooperated fully. And Maria? I promoted her. Chief Financial Officer of the farm. She had protected the records when everyone else was trying to erase them. She had earned that position 100 times over. Walter became something I never expected. A friend. He started coming to the farm twice a week, sometimes to help repair equipment, sometimes to work in the workshop, sometimes just to drink coffee. He never asked for anything. That was what made him different. He had stopped to help me when he had every reason to keep driving. And I had stopped to help him when I had every reason to let an old man struggle with his own table saw. Neither of us knew what that moment would become. 3 months passed. Then February arrived. The almond trees began blooming. White and pink flowers appeared against the bare branches. One morning, I walked toward the oldest tree, Helen's tree. I carried a young almond sapling. I dug a hole beside the place where she used to sit. Walter followed me. Without asking, he knelt beside me. We placed the young tree into the soil. He held it steady while I packed the dirt around the roots. I stepped back. The tree leaned slightly. I smiled. She would have said it's crooked. Walter looked at it. It's not crooked. I laughed. She'd have said it anyway. Walter smiled. Then he said, and she'd have fixed it herself. For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. I looked across the orchard. 340 acres, rows of trees stretching toward the horizon. My father's land. My wife's memory. My life's work. Still here. Still standing. I finally understood what my father had meant all those years ago. The ground really does remember. It remembers every honest thing, every sacrifice, every person who stood beside you, every stranger who stopped when they could have kept driving. And eventually, it remembers betrayal too. My son thought the farm was something that could simply be transferred on paper. He thought my age made me weak. He thought my kindness made me blind. He was wrong. My revenge wasn't destroying him. My revenge was refusing to let him destroy me. I let the evidence speak. I let the law decide. I didn't lie. I didn't threaten him. I didn't become the monster he had imagined he needed to defeat. I simply stood my ground and watched the truth do what truth does when you give it enough time. It catches up. Every time. Before I left the orchard that morning, I placed my hand against the old almond tree. For a moment I could almost imagine Helen sitting beneath it, paperback in her lap, sweet tea beside her. I whispered, "We kept it." Then I turned toward the farmhouse, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was finally walking forward. I'm 60. 4 years old. I almost lost everything I'd built. Not because someone was stronger than me, not because someone had more money, and not because I was incapable of defending myself. I almost lost it because I loved someone so deeply that I stopped questioning what he was doing. That's the part nobody warns you about. We spend our lives learning how to recognize strangers with bad intentions. But sometimes the most dangerous person isn't standing outside your door. Sometimes he's sitting at your kitchen table, calling you dad, asking whether you slept well, bringing you cornbread, smiling while calculating exactly how much your trust is worth. Ethan knew me. He knew my habits. He knew my weaknesses. He knew Helen's name could soften me. He knew I hated confrontation. He knew I'd spent my whole life believing family should protect family. And he used every one of those things against me. But he made one mistake. He underestimated what happens when an honest person finally stops being afraid of the truth. I didn't need to become ruthless. I didn't need to threaten him. I didn't need to destroy him myself. I simply gathered the evidence. I trusted the people who had been brave enough to tell the truth. And I let the law do the rest. That was my revenge. Not revenge born from hatred. Revenge born from refusing to surrender. Maria kept the records. Walter kept the recording. Daniel kept the case organized. Victor told the truth. And eventually, even Melissa told the truth. Every piece of the puzzle came from somewhere Ethan hadn't considered. People. Ordinary people. People he'd probably assumed didn't matter. But they did. That's another lesson I learned. Never underestimate the person standing quietly in the corner. Never assume kindness means weakness. And never mistake someone's patience for surrender. My father once told me the ground remembers everything. Now I believe he was talking about more than dirt. He was talking about consequences. Every choice leaves something behind. Every lie creates another lie. Every act of betrayal creates evidence. Every person you hurt carries a memory. And eventually, those memories find their way into the light. Ethan wanted my farm because he thought the land was valuable. He never understood why it mattered to me. He saw acres. I saw my father. He saw property. I saw Helen beneath the almond tree. He saw a business. I saw 40 years of mornings before sunrise. The farm wasn't just something I owned. It was something I had built. Something I had protected. Something I had promised to leave better than I found it. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Walter still comes by twice a week. Sometimes we work on old machinery. Sometimes we sit outside and drink coffee. He still drives that battered pickup. The table saw is still in his workshop. Every time I see it, I remember the morning everything changed. A man had been struggling alone beside a county road. I stopped, because that's what decent people do. I never expected that helping him would save my life. That's why I don't call it coincidence anymore. I call it grace. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness returns to you when you need it most. So if you're listening to this and someone has made you feel powerless, remember this. You don't have to become cruel to defend yourself. You don't have to become the person who hurt you. Stand still. Gather the truth. Protect what matters. And let consequences find the people who earned them. Because a good man doesn't need to inherit everything. He builds. He protects. He keeps his word. And when someone tries to take away everything he's built, sometimes all he has to do is stand firm. The truth will do the rest. And if you've ever trusted the wrong person, been betrayed by someone you loved, or watched someone underestimate you, then you already understand what I learned. The most dangerous person in your life may not be a stranger. It may be someone who knows exactly how much you trust them and decides to use it. But remember something else. The ground remembers, and so does the truth. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe to Dad's Cold Revenge, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you discovered someone you loved was secretly trying to take everything you'd built? And if you want more stories where betrayal meets consequences, stay with us. Because sometimes karma doesn't knock. It walks straight through the front door.